Hello and welcome to Horseplayer Happy Hour. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornital. I have left the Brooklyn bunker once again. I could have gone to another racetrack today. We were at Kentucky Downs last week. I was nearly at Woodbine today, but with the night racing, I decided to check out some downtown Toronto action, and I ended up at Bellwood's Brewery, which is a phenomenal place. Been really enjoying the food, the drink, the hospitality here. So yeah, I got kind of stuck. So we're doing the show from the brewery. Only appropriate for Horseplayer Happy Hour, if you ask me. And coming to us from his normal undisclosed location in New England, we have a man who you've seen on various television coverage of racing, including on NBC Sports. You know him from his own eponymous podcast. He is TV's Matt Bernier. Matt, what's shaking?
Getting ready to pack up and head your way. I should get into town tomorrow afternoon at some point, and looking
Beautiful.
forward to, the big Saturday of racing up at Woodbine. Going to be covering the race for TSN, the Woodbine Mile. That's the only race that we'll be on for. But we'll talk about the other win and you're in races for the Breeders' Cup, which is the 2-year-old events, and we'll touch on those a little bit here. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to getting back up there. I don't know what the weather's like up there right now. This is the first day here in New England that feels genuinely like fall, which is a little bit like a little part of me dies when I say that because summer is come and gone. But yeah, it's today's the first day that if you're in the shade, you're quite cold.
Yeah, you could have had a sweater on today here. I mean, it warmed up nice, but it was in the 50s in the morning, and I think we're going to have this weather. But this is my favorite weather of the year. I mean, I know what you're saying. The summer's over. We're a year older, all that jazz. But here's the good news. It's the fall. It's my favorite weather of the year, and it means we're in the proper run-up to the Breeders' Cup. And we'll be talking about these 3 Breeders' Cup winning year in races. We'll do the reset. We're going to do that gimmick where we do a little bit of this show that also then becomes the excuse me. Oh, you can tell the beer's good. The opening of the late week show. So that'll be a lot of fun. I've never belched on air before. This is the first time for everything. But how are things generally with you? How are you recovering from last weekend of racing?
Yeah, it's been a busy stretch here. Was up at Saratoga for the Jockey Club, and then last weekend was in Connecticut going over the races from Kentucky Downs, and now we've got this big event coming up at Woodbine. I'll be home for a couple weeks and then head back to Connecticut for some Keeneland action. But I think to your point, we're in the nitty gritty now. This is the deep dive where you're starting to maybe not separate contenders from pretenders as far as the Breeders' Cup is concerned, but I think it's always good to start formulating ideas at this time of year. For the most part now, this will be the last time you see these horses before the first weekend in November at Keeneland. Some of the horses you won't see again, whether they are the horses that ran at the end of August or, perhaps even earlier than that. So these divisions are starting to form and come together, and you have a pretty decent idea of who will and won't run in certain divisions. And the Europeans and the foreign contingent is always the wild card. You never truly know until the end who shows up and who doesn't, and that can dramatically change the complexion of some of the races. But as far as our domestic runners are concerned, starting to get an idea of who fits and who doesn't. And, I think that's important in a year like this where I was actually thinking about it, Pete, and I'm curious your thoughts. You look at some of these dirt divisions, boy, they seem pretty formful, don't they? It's going to be kind of hard to get around Flightline. It's going to be kind of hard to get around a horse like Jackie's Warrior in the sprint. The distaff, I don't know, isn't it 2 or 3 horses that kind of fit in there? Outside of that, I think the turf races are the ones where perhaps you could see chaos. And who knows, maybe this weekend will sort of downplay that depending on who comes out of the Woodbine Mile. One name in particular.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. I think you're probably right. I mean, generally speaking, dirt just feels more formful in American racing, right? Because we've got turf always has that extra element of chaos when you're dealing with extra turns and firm ground, and the nature of turf racing makes it such that it just feels like the more attritional dirt racing you can sometimes have more confidence in. And this year, more than any before, and we'll see if I follow through on this, but I'm vowing to try to get my ducks in a row, my notes in order, be like ready to talk about these races more than usual, even before we have PPs, and maybe even try to do some YouTube coverage, like looking into top contenders and, just really trying to stay on top of this so that then when we get the draw, when we get those last minute questions, we could spend all the time that's needed focusing on the more, changeable pieces of this. I think this might be a good year to do that.
I'm very guilty of being more tied into the handicapping as opposed to the gambling. The Breeders' Cup is no exception. just based on the, what the nature of the work is. But at least with the contest ongoing, the BCBC, which we'll talk about here momentarily, I do feel like this is as good a time as any for those of you that may kind of fall into the same trap that I do, more worried about how the race is going to unfold, this, that, and the other. Do all your work early, and then that week of, really hone in on the gambling part of it. Focus on what bets you want to make, what opportunities are presenting themselves. I don't think you can just arbitrarily go into an event like the Breeders' Cup and say, I'm going to play all the trifectas. Well, certain races may lend themselves to trifectas more than others. Some of them may lend themselves to great win bet opportunities. Some of them may be the picks. I mean, I feel like all the picks are going to be appetizing come Breeders' Cup weekend, but that would be my advice, and it's do as I say, not as I do, because I'm as bad about it as anyone. But I focus on the handicapping, and then it's almost like the gambling's the afterthought, when truth be told, it should be the opposite.
It's a great point, and another reason why I think more than ever before, we're going to try to get some handicapping content out early so we can focus on some more betting-focused stuff as we get closer to the event itself. We're in this funny situation now, Matt, coming this year's Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, where the last 3 BCBC winners are in the extended In the Money Media family, as well as the guy who finished second the last 2 years. It's kind of funny. It's like a point of personal pride now. I want to see if we can keep the title in the family. What do you think?
Well, selfishly, I hope it's me. I'm sorry, Jonathan, and anybody else that's involved. But selfishly, I hope I'm the one. But I've had some decent success at Keeneland. The first year in 2015. It's easy to kind of armchair quarterback it and go back and revisionist history. My only really strong opinion of the weekend was Stephanie's kitten, and I should have just loaded up on her. And instead, I only played 1,000 to win on her. It bought me a little bit of time, and I just kind of bled away from there. And then a couple of years ago, I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn until the final 2 races, where I just played a big double into Authentic. He ended up winning, and I walked out of there with, a few $1,000s, which is better than, a stick in the eye. So, no, I haven't had the big success there at Keeneland, but, kind of been nibbling around it enough that I go into it this year feeling pretty good. And, it really does. It boils down to a couple things. You need to have one or two, just at least in my opinion, you need to have a couple of big, really strong opinions that you're willing to go out on a limb on. And then also, I think the most fascinating aspect of this year's BCBC, let's just assume Flightline goes and does what Flightline has done throughout his entire career. We've talked about it so often. This event boils down to a big bet in the final race. Well, what does that look like with a horse that's going to be 2 to 5?
It ain't going to be a win bet.
So that's the thing. Is it going to be someone who looks at it and says, rather than bet, I'm making it up $25,000 to win on Flightline, which isn't going to get you a heck of a lot. Are you playing a cold $25,000 double from the turf, one horse, or you could Dutch it, obviously, but, I'm thinking of really swinging for the fences. Do you play a massive double of a horse that you like in the turf into Flightline, and you try to turn that into 4 or 5 to 1 kind of thing? If you do that, maybe that's enough to get you the prize. But to be fair, some of the winning scores lately have been astronomical. So even at that point, maybe 125 is not going to be enough for you to win.
Well, you have to remember that the same market dynamic that makes it hard to win also makes it harder to cold deck doubles, exactas, and tries. So it might be the year where you don't see that much movement, or you see people going all in against him, and that either working out splendidly or not working out. It could be a real feast or famine dynamic. And I'll be interested to talk to, Matt Miller and JK have similar approaches. JK has been twice the last 2 years. Matt Miller, who won last year. Matt Miller, for all his life, doesn't want to play an exacta or a double. He really wants to be able to pick a horse and bet to win. But I'd be very curious to talk to him if Flightline makes him alter that approach and say, hey, does it become 3 exactas with that, whatever bankroll, as opposed to 1 horse to win? And then with JK, right, does he have to get more aggressive instead of going, 4 by 3 in the double, as he's done a couple of these, I think both these last 2 years? Does he have to go 1 by 1 or 2 by 1 and change it that way? Oh, we have a very good question from Michael Domable, who's a member of the in the Money Media family, who's been doing a tremendous job covering stuff for Kentucky Downs. And this is a question, Michael, I feel like it's an implied host fail that I've never asked Matt this. How difficult is it for you or for Eddie O to be playing in the tournament while also being on air? Isn't it all you can do to just try to keep the betting straight in a contest like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the only good thing for me and Edzo is the amount of time between the races. And typically we kind of know when we're coming on, and there have been other little hits that we have to do interspersed. I did a couple things with Todd Schrupp last year from TVG, now FanDuel TV. And we do a couple little updates here and there, but for the most part, we know when we're going to come on. I think it's still an added dynamic that, I understand what I'm saying when I say in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to multitask like that. But, look, I'm certainly not complaining about it. Don't get me wrong. But it's another responsibility that I will say, at least with our setup, we're stationary. We're not out there reporting or, running around trying to do any of that kind of stuff for the Breeders' Cup. Which,
good point.
If we needed to do that, I don't know that I could successfully do it, frankly.
Yeah.
Or it would be one of those things where I would be much less inclined to, try to get a little bit cute with some of these races and maybe, you play a staggered set of trifectas, which I did a lot of at Keeneland a few years ago, where, I would have two horses I would key. I would use other horses in second and third, but I did it all in different denominations where, this is a $144 trifecta. This is a X, Y, and Z. If you're out there, having to report or having to run somebody down and do an interview, you just don't have that luxury. Fortunately enough, Edzo and I, we kind of have our setup where we're at, and we go on from there. I believe, I don't know for certain, but we have been in the green room the past 2 times. I don't believe we're going to be there this year. I think we're going to have a different area, but that's still TBD. As long as I have a window that I can run to swipe the card, we'll be all right.
Have you ever been in a situation where you said to your producer, "Oh, not that race. Can I go on the next race because I have to put in 72 different trifecta combinations"? Has the betting ever affected you in that level?
No, honestly, any time that I've known that I have a race where it's very spready for me, and it is that kind of thing where there could be as many, 50 different bets that have to be put in. That's one where just, I'm not like patting myself on the back, but responsibly, I do it well ahead of when we're going on to work. I'm still, as much as I love the contest, I'm still there to work, and that's first. And then the contest, let's say 1A and 1B. Yeah. 1A is work, 1B is the contest.
It's hard with if you're using Dutching principles though, getting in last minute, it's you are ceding a little bit of an edge there to your competition.
For sure. And that's the thing with me. So many of my plays were either weighted tries or daily doubles. And you can go back and actually pull up, I don't know if they're still up there from all those years ago, but the good thing with the Breeders' Cup betting challenge, you get to see the full printout of the plays people have made. I know that I'm not getting the absolute optimized bang for my buck, doing it the way that I have to do it with the TV element of it, knowing that I'm putting my stuff in 25 minutes ahead of time. But again, I'd like to think that with the amount of time between races for the Breeders' Cup on Friday and Saturday, that the markets are relatively solidified. There's going to be some changes. Yes, absolutely. But it's not like it's a Thursday at Aqueduct where all of a sudden $1,000 double is going to just, shift the pool leaps and bounds. I'd like to think that they're pretty solid.
And I would also say in the Breeders' Cup with so many contenders, unlike regular racing, whatever move in the market happens is almost as likely to go in your favor as not if you're a sharp horse player. So one more memory lane BCBC question, and then we got to look at this race at Aqueduct. That's Belmont at Aqueduct that's coming up. But let's flash back to, was it 2015 with Stephanie's Kitten? And I'll admit, when you told me how much you bet or how little you bet, I remember cringing a little bit, just because I knew that was your strongest opinion.
Yeah.
If you had gone all in there, how would the contest have been different? Did you have strong enough opinions later, or in the end of the day, would you have just blown more money as opposed to bled out what you had? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the only thing that may have ended up differently was I went into the Classic looking at it saying, well, Pharaoh's Lone Speed, he just clicked. Honestly, it could be very similar to this year with Flightline, where you just say, okay, boom, he's on top. Don't think about anything else. But I thought there was a scenario underneath where you could get something a little bit kooky. Now, I didn't pinpoint FNX, but anybody that followed me when I was at the racing forum knows I loved FNX. He was one of my favorites during that time. So I had toyed with the idea of playing some sort of a try with FNX at least involved in second and third. I wouldn't have used the entire field in second and third, which I know some people did. They went as simple as single all and just punch it up, for $50 or whatever it is. I was going to probably whittle it down to 5 or 6 horses. Now, I don't know, it's easy to sit here and say I would have done that for, $40 or whatever I would have had as far as bankroll was concerned at the time, but none of the other opinions came to fruition. And that's why I at least kind of look at it with some solace of, all right, well, even if I had bet 5,000 to win on Stephanie's kitten instead of the 1,000 that I did, yeah, sure, that gets me, in that 40 ballpark. Maybe I've got a little bit more to play with. And maybe it would have ended up being the same thing that happened for me in 2014 with Texas Red. That allowed me to get a little bit spready and a little creative. And then that allowed me to hit on the sprint, which put me into good position. Maybe that would have ended up playing out, but it didn't. So I can't say here, with a straight face and say, I would have run top 10 if it played out differently.
The decision tree we talk about so much. It's like an In the Money Media team meeting. We have a good Michael Adolphson question we'll get to, but probably not until after this race. Craig, I think we should go and take a look at what's happening at Aqueduct real quick here, and then we can also do maybe a quick leaderboard update as well. 140 players today, meaning 14 will go on and play in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge qualifier on Saturday. And huge opportunity with this smaller field. I think we said last week, all that needs to be done at this point to qualify for the late season, for the postseason tournament, is maybe 1/3 could get you enough points to get in there still. So lots of people with chances to get involved and punch their tickets as we approach the end of our regular season. And, we talked about before how this works. We have a very competitive race at the top of the leaderboard. We did have some big movement last week with Greg Kingman absolutely dominating, running 1-2 and earning all manner of tour points and ending up at the top of the tour leaderboard. He's in great position to win that Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge seat. We see it there. Craig, I think we should go. Do I have this wrong? Isn't this race at Aqueduct about to go off? Or do I have
they are. They're walking over to the gate at this point. They've just gotten onto the turf course.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there's Johnny on the spot. Craig, it's a race 7 about to go here. And I don't know if how much time you spent in this one, but it seemed like a race where we might be able to get a little bit of a price in. To me, Matt, I know Nick Tamaro on the blog picked number 8, Miss Taparado, as one potential horse to get in here. 9-2 on the morning line. Felt like Tuscan Queen was maybe one that could be bet against. Miss Green, another logical, I thought would get a very good trip. Maybe stalking in this spot. Oh, but 3-2. That's probably short enough on that one. I don't know. I might be tempted to follow Nick in with the 8 runner in this spot. Did you have any strong opinion in here?
No, well, I'm just kind of going through the PPs right now, and the most striking thing to me is the number 6 Thunder Love, who's 9-1, not completely dead on the board, goes out for Paulo Lobo. When has Lobo ever had a horse in New York just on a random day? And this was a horse that was based in the Midwest for the entire time that she's been in the U.S. I don't know. Those are always things that at least make my ears perk up a little bit. Doesn't mean that she will or won't run, but 9-1, that buyer 3 starts back is at least puts her in play. I think a low 80 is probably good enough or close to good enough to be competitive in here, especially compared to, Mrs. Green. I know she was impressive last out, but that's really the only race on her page that makes her I don't even know if she has a race on her page that makes her 8-5.
That's way too short.
I don't know. Maybe I'd gamble a little bit here with a horse like Thunder Love, just purely on the idea that, like, what are you doing here? And for connections that aren't typically in New York at this time of year.
The last race is actually pretty good. I mean, that was very slowly run early. It wasn't coded blue on time form, but I'm almost surprised that it wasn't. And she was finding her best footing late in the manner of a filly who shapes like she might enjoy the 6 furlongs. It's interesting. Her only, she's never run this far. She had one try overseas at 6, and it was a debacle. But, it was a Group 1 against Tenebris, and we can forgive that. So, I mean, she's kind of unexposed going 6 in the U.S. I'm actually liking that idea very much. Maybe we play the 6 and the 8 against the field here and see if we can get a little bit of a price in a race where the 3 is logical but over bet, and the 1 felt like one to maybe try to take on. So, yeah, they're going in the gate here for the 7th race at this Belmont at Aqueduct meeting. Folks curious about more content regarding previewing the Belmont at Aqueduct meeting. We just did a whole show sponsored by our friends at Adelphi Racing. Had a good conversation with Matt Kater, giving us a nice overview, sort of a stable tour of what they've got cooking at this meet. Nick Tamaro talked about how some of the classic stakes races associated with Belmont Fall might be run a little bit differently at Aqueduct. And then we had Matt Vagvolgi giving us a deep dive into the numbers. So all kinds of good stuff on that show. We recommend folks check it out as they pop from the gate here. What do you think about the positioning of this 9 runner? Maybe a little in between here for your taste. What do you think?
Well, she's settled more kind of toward the rear now. She's in those purple silks in between horses. I'm not terribly worried about that kind of a spot. It's just a matter of, 23 and 2. We haven't been at Aqueduct in God knows how long. I don't know if that's cooking on a day like today or not. Javier seems to have a pretty good hold of her, though.
Yeah, I think this race looks like right now it's going to probably flow to the front with the 10 Get the Candy and the 3 Mrs. Green. But we'll see. Maybe for some reason it'll start to come apart at the seams and we can get these other runners involved.
I mean, she has every chance.
Yeah, I mean, she's running now. So let's see. She can level out and maybe catch this 3 runner. Come on with this Paolo Lobo piece on the outside. Come on, run them all down.
No, the Wood's going to get us, though.
No, we got momentum. We can beat that horse. How about the 8 for second? How about the 8 for second? How about the 8 for second? Yes!
68.
Boom!
It's an easy game, Pete.
One time for the good guys.
It's an easy game. It's fun. It's nice when it works.
It's not going to be a bad exactor either, let me tell you.
I
have to say exactor because I'm up in Toronto.
What is that, 8 over 5? I mean, that's gonna be pretty good in a full field.
Yeah, it should be a strong number with the favorite out. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, could the clock have been wrong? Like, part of when I was saying, the pace is going to hold together is because it sounded so slow. But
yeah, and I mean, I'm sure you know this as well. I remember when I was at the Forum, Mike Beer was the one that really kind of like hammered it home that Aqueduct's turf course is really, really funny in that some horses get over it like nothing, and others, for whatever reason, even in good form, they just can't run on it. And this was one that, again, and it doesn't always work. Don't get me wrong. I'm just not sitting here trying to, go full red board. When horses or connections that don't typically show up with a horse that could seemingly have stayed home, I don't know. I always find that a little interesting.
No, it's very, very interesting. And then when you're poking into the sectionals is what took it over the top for me.
Yeah.
And Michael Adolphson mentions that it could be a good weekend for the legend that is Paolo Lobo. And I think he's referring to In Love in the mile. We'll get there. We're not quite there yet, but we're going to get there. Michael Domable had a Lobo stat. Look at that. The good stats on dirt, but still 3 for 3 now. You can upgrade those numbers too. Let's get to the original. Let's loop back to the conversation we were having before. We're going to button up some of these comments, and then we're going to do our little reset. Actually, I should see. Is the next, with the change in schedule at Aqueduct, will we have one more race on the show, Matt? That's a good question.
I believe it's going to be very close. It might be just, we should have one more in about 20, 25 minutes.
Okay, so what we're going to do then is quickly blow through some comments. We're going to do we'll do that trick where we do the open for the late week show, and we'll go from there. But this was an excellent question from Michael about making the big bet in the turf and then going safe, moderately heavy on Flightline. He mentions an interesting runner that I don't know much about. We'll have to talk about Botnick. You can. So we often talk about doubles, and JK is a big believer in using that double pool. And then there are others who think you're better off, rather than using the double pool, to do something more along the lines of what I think Michael is suggesting, where you make what I would call a synthetic double. In truth, in the contest like the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, you could do a synthetic pick 3 or a synthetic pick 4, etc. And all I mean by that is you're basically just making a parlay.
Right.
And the advantage of that is you know what you're looking at. And if you're going to take my theory before that Flightline winning is also going to depress what people can do in exactas and trifectas, let's just use a theoretical example. You end up out of the turf and you've got 100. Well, you know what? Getting to 140 with 2 to 5 on Flightline, maybe that is more useful than we originally theorizing. If you're in a financial position and you have the gambling personality to treat this stuff like monopoly money. So I think that's actually very, very interesting. You may get more juice in the double. Maybe you get 25 cents on the dollar instead of 20. But I think you can argue that ability to peep the leaderboard one more time might be worth more than 5 cents on the dollar. What do you think, Matt?
You've piqued my interest now. So I'm pulling up the chart from Keeneland in 2020 because I just want to see what. So that would have been Tarnawa into Authentic, correct?
Correct.
Off the top of my head. Now, in that, the way that you just laid it out, if you basically just did a parlay with the last two races, Tarnawa
you would have done way better. But it was a weird situation where Tarnawa drifted big on the tote for reasons that no one can understand.
Yeah, so she ended up going off at 9-2, paid $11.40 to win.
Her international price was like 7-2. Like
really?
Dove and I bet her at 4-1 and felt like we were stealing.
Yeah, and she finished a length ahead of Magical, and then we had a 4-1 shot in Authentic winning. So you had an $11 horse into a $10 horse. Let's just and I can't remember what Jonathan did, and I don't want to. We don't need to go over somebody else's business. But I think
it was a 4x3. I think it was a 4x3 all-in double.
Okay, so the double paid. If I can find it in the silly chart here. Pick three, pick six. Daily double paid for $1. It paid $30. So to your point, if you wanted to say, let's just use $100. I know it was much more than that and whatever, but $100 in that double, you would have gotten back what, 3,000, somewhere thereabouts.
Yeah.
With the idea of $1,000. 100 into an $11 horse, so you're at 1,100, and then you bet all that on a 4-1 shot. You actually would have been better off with the parlay, as opposed to just playing the double pool.
I do think that will happen from time to time. I think there was something very weird about what went on in that pool with the win price on Tarnawa. And Michael Adolphson backing us up here, that the Tarnawa was a gift that day.
Maybe actually, and to be fair, maybe I'm going to pull it up now. Maybe the 15 Breeders' Cup is a better example.
That's what I was going to suggest, because that was the last Breeders' Cup betting challenge I remember that was won in the turf, and it's probably not, to Michael's point earlier, it's probably not a coincidence that was won in the turf, not the Classic, because you had a 2-5 shot win.
So you had Found win the turf. Now, granted, she beat a 4-5 shot in Golden Horn, so that changes things a little bit. She was 6-1, and then you had Pharaoh, who was 3-5. That daily double paid for $2, paid $45. So for $1, let's call it 22, just for easy numbers. If you had a $100 double, you're looking at $2,200 coming back. If you instead bet your $100 on Found at 6-1, and then parlayed that 600 into a 3-5 shot, in that case, you're probably better off going with the double pool. And that may be what you're looking at coming up this year with Flightline, because he won't be higher than 3-5. I can't imagine he would be. I think he's going to be closer to 1-5 than 3-5.
Yeah.
Actually, this is going to be a very good example. It was only an 8-horse classic. You're probably going to have at most 10, assuming Flightline stays healthy and sound. And also, just for ha-has, the try in this race, it was Pharaoh FNX honor code 3-5 over 33-1 over 9-2, who was the second choice, 9-2. That trifecta comes back for $2, 322. So think about that. You've got the top two choices. if you do something like I've done with tries in the past, and I believe Nick Tamaro has done it as well, or he does it frequently, where you basically key 2 horses. And then you can use, if you want to use the rest of the field or you want to use whatever else it may be. If you keyed the top 2 choices in that bet, Pharaoh honor code, all, Pharaoh honor code, all, Pharaoh honor code, and said one of the 2 favorites has to win, and then whatever else, and the other one has to finish either second or third. I mean, that's not a bad payoff whatsoever.
It's huge.
So, you could, in theory, let's say this year you end up with Flightline, with the I don't even know who would be a big number like that in a race. Let's use American Revolution as the example. Flightline, American Revolution clunks up for second, and then you've got Epicenter third. I mean, there will be people playing that for, I could easily see that being a $500 trifecta at the bitter end. And maybe you don't get back 322, but, maybe you get back 100 or something like that. You know what I mean?
It's an interesting idea, and I think we'll look more back at that 2015 Breeders' Cup as a potential pointer. Just to button up the Tarnawa discussion, Michael mentions that maybe Keene subbing for Sumion, remember, who had the COVID issue. Maybe that was part of why on the tote. But that was one of the few times I've ever seen in a really liquid market the tote price just completely out of whack with international. I said before that we got 4-1. I think we got 7-1 and felt like 7-2 and felt like we were stealing. So it was just a weird. It's a hard year. 2015 is the year I think that's worth going back for more study. All right. While we have a chance here, before we have this next race, I think we should do the setup for the early week show and take a look at some of these races at Woodbine on Saturday. You up for that, Matt?
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Woodbine Mile Day, and we're doing that gimmick where we're doubling up. This is sort of a Horseplayer Happy Hour preview meets In the Money Players podcast late week show. PTF here from Bellwood's Brewery in downtown Toronto, getting ready to head up to Woodbine, maybe as soon as to catch the back half of tonight's card, and joined by TV's Matt Bernier. Matt, how are things?
Doing well, Pete. Looking forward to getting up there myself. I take off on Friday. Oh, I guess if you're listening to this, you probably have already gotten up there. But big day of racing at Woodbine on Saturday, highlighted by the mile. It's always one of the best races of the year, and it's been extremely productive as far as the Breeders' Cup Mile is concerned. So definitely keep eyes on what happens at Woodbine on Saturday.
No doubt about it. And when you say take off, when I'm in Canada and I hear take off, I can't help but think, about SCTV and the McKenzie brothers. But that might be before your time.
Yeah, no, that did not ringing a bell there.
You'd like it. It's funny stuff. Let's talk about these big races at Woodbine on the big day. And you know what? We'll go out of order because I really want to start with a race that I think is worthy of. It's like a true grade one. We have a lot of grade one races in this country, and some are grade one and some are grade one pluses. I feel like we can legitimately call this year's Rico Woodbine Mile Stakes a grade one plus. And we've got Modern Games going to be heading the market here and really bringing top international form lines. This is the kind of stuff that we really, really like to see. I don't know. I'm kind of uncreative in this race, Matt. I feel like if he runs his A race and you look at the figures and form, and see what he did within 2 lengths to Baid in the Sussex Stakes, one of the great mile races of the year anywhere. I think the rest might be running for second. How big of a threat do you think Modern Games is in this spot?
Well, he's the horse to beat. There's no question about it. For many reasons, not just the fact that he's coming off that giant effort against Baid, but Charlie Appleby, when he sends horses over that aren't his sort of, let's say, his B or C string. We've seen it over the years with Aidan O'Brien. The B or C string is usually good enough to get it done. But whenever they send over one of their better ones, and it's crazy because Modern Games might be third in the pecking order for his 3-year-olds. But the point is, when the good ones come, they typically fire. And Appleby's numbers over the past 2 years in grade one races in North America are off the charts. I believe he's 9 for 18. 14 of them have hit the board. I mean, they all show up and run. William Buick is coming along. I don't think that's any, and I don't know what's running over in Europe on Saturday, but for him to be making the trip, he didn't make the trip last year, and Appleby swept basically all the big races ongoing. He had Frankie Dettori. This year he's got his number one in Buick. I mean, the race goes through Modern Games, and that's kind of an aggressive statement considering how deep this field is truly. But I think if he runs his A game, I think they're all running for second.
Do you think you're going to end up picking him, or are you going to try to get cute here?
Well, the problem is from a gambling standpoint, he's 7-5 on the line. I mean, what's stopping him from going off at 4-5 or even money? And is that too short? It's in the eye of the beholder. Maybe he is genuinely a 50% chance in a race like this. I think there are other appealing horses in here. Push comes to shove, I'll probably end up picking him, but I'm going to be more interested in trying to get a little cute with maybe some exactas using some bigger numbers underneath.
Let's talk about some of the horses you think might be interesting to go with Modern Games, or an alternative if he does go off 4-5. I mean, you talk about him as a 50% chance. I feel like that's right, but I also feel like he could be 4-5 or maybe even a hair shorter, and at that point, it might be time to start fishing.
Well, Ivar, I think, makes plenty of sense. Paulo Lobo is taking a bit of a more conservative path with this horse to get to the Breeders' Cup. This is really going to be his first test of the season. And keep in mind, he only ran 3 times last year before a good closing third-place finish out at Del Mar. This horse loves Keeneland. So we'll find out about the one-turn mile at Woodbine, but I think this is going to be a very good means to an end to get ready for the World Championships. Problem is he's 4-1 on the morning line, so you're not really going to gain a ton as far as value is concerned in an exacta pool. Cheryl Spite, the local hope, I think is a little interesting. If you can make the case that he's just gone off form, and to be fair, he went 7/8 last time, chasing no pace, draw a line through it. He ran on dirt in the Salvatore Mile. He's not a dirt horse. The Turf Classic was over whatever kind of turf you want to call that at Churchill Downs. And then prior to that, you've got a Grade 1 win in the Maker's Mark Mile. So,
dirtied up form.
Yeah, very dirty. I could see Cheryl Spite running a big race. The one that I'm most interested in, I respect Wakanaka. I think the other Team Valor horse is interesting. Homer Screen. Homer Screen on Figs is very light. But if you go back and watch the tape, really for the last 2 races specifically, but I'll even include the first start off, the lengthy layoff in the Daytona going down the hill at Santa Anita. The last 2 races at Del Mar and Santa Anita, Homer Screen has been 6 wide throughout. He's had absolutely no chance, even with the wicked pace to run at and the Eddie Reed. The Reed has come back very live. You've had a number of horses come back and win out of it, including Hong Kong Harry, who came back and won the Del Mar Mile. Almost every horse, with the exception of Masterpiece, has improved their fig next out. Homer Screen's paired up Beyer tops of 92. I think the one-turn mile is going to work well for this horse. Joe Bravo ships in. I don't know if he's good enough to win, but I think he could run second or third at 10 or 15-1, and maybe all of a sudden he makes Modern Games a playable piece on top in an exacta or a try.
It's interesting. I think Finest Sound is worth pausing on for a minute. Way less enticing or obvious of a profile. But if you just look at the type of figure comparisons that Stephen Bonnick and our man Rob Dove, one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today, do, I think they have Modern Games likely to run about a 101, 102. And I think that Finest Sound is like a 99. So, trips can easily make the difference between those two, especially if you're dealing with one runner that's going to be 4-5 and the other is going to be 8-1. Did you give him any count?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the running style is interesting. This one was forward in that most recent run where he got run down by his uncoupled stablemate. I'll be very curious. This one-turn mile, I know the Europeans are always going to have a little bit of an edge in terms of stamina. Boy, that stretch at Woodbine goes on forever and a day. And I just wonder, there's other speed in this race. If Finest Sound ends up finding himself up forward, you're going to have other horses like Get Smoking out there who's going to be just cooking on the front end, you would think. You're going to have Town Cruise, the winner of this race last year, who has nowhere to go but forward. I could see things getting a little bit hot, and boy, that final 1/8 of a mile, that's going to be a proper test of stamina, and it's why I think a horse like Modern Games, who, I'm curious, what do you think he is? Like a perfect world, a 1 1/16 type? He's not a 1 1/4 horse. He's probably a little bit more than a miler. Some of these other types, I think, fit in here very well. I don't know. I guess I felt like I had to get rid of one of the Europeans, and of the 2, I would prefer Modern Games. I will say, though, if that sort of a projection, a 101 or a 102 Beyer, is what we're looking at for Modern Games, I would argue that even money is not value, because I think there are other horses fully capable of running a 101 or a 102 in this spot Saturday.
I feel pretty good about that prediction. So it does feel like there's a chance he's going to be overbet. Michael makes a point that Dove made also, the idea that that form line specifically from the Sussex really flatters modern games, because he was just kind of, sucked along, and meanwhile Baid was eased up, and it's not like he's really within 2 lengths of Baid, but the market might bet it, especially here where you don't see a figure for modern games in the program. They might bet it like he's really 2 lengths to Baid. And yeah, I mean, it's funny. I already did a write-up for attheraces.com, and I did pick modern games. But also, that's also hoping that there's going to be odds against around. At 4 to 5, I think we're supposed to try to get cute with one of these other horses.
I'm also, it doesn't help us gambling on Saturday, but selfishly, I do want to see a big performance from modern games, because this mile division in the States anyway, I feel like is very much throw them up, and how they fall is how they fall. I suppose Casa Creed is in there. Regal Glory is in there. Maybe, some of the horses out west are in there, but we don't have an absolute star in terms of the flat milers. And modern games, I don't know, not just because of everything that went on at Del Mar last year in the juvenile turf, but the way that he ran, I don't know, he feels like an American horse to me. And I know he is European based, but, I don't know. I just feel like this is what he's supposed to be doing. And to Michael's point, and I kind of touched on it briefly, he was kind of the third stringer for the 3-year-olds for Appleby for the majority of the season. So, I don't know. He may have been the third stringer. I think he's a genuine horse. I think he's very good. We'll find out if he passes the test on Saturday. I feel like when Appleby comes with a good one, they typically run. I'm expecting him to deliver.
We'll see how it all turns out. Let's do a little bit on the other big races at Woodbine on Saturday. We're going to have a full-on baby talk sponsored by Gainesway segment later in the show, but let's do a little bit of baby talk here, talking about these 2 races. And I think the one that I'm most excited about is certainly the Grade 1 Summer for the 2-year-old colts, going 1 mile on the Woodbine turf, where you're going to have another very difficult to contend with Appleby runner in Mysterious Night. But for me, Matt, I have a horse I really like in this spot, and I think it's a write your own ticket, could be any price kind of situation on the number 5, Sammy Stone for Catherine Day Phillips. I just absolutely love this debut run for this Oscar Performance baby, because this was a bit against the flow of the race for sure, not breaking through even fractions at best. And then it was also a day where you just couldn't really close. And this was one of the only horses that closed. Given who Daddy is, I think the turf is going to be okay. We're dealing with a maiden who's only been 6 furlongs on the synth, going a mile. I'm assuming this horse, even in just a 7-horse field, is going to be 15 or 20 to 1. I like Sammy Stone. I'll have Mysterious Night everywhere, but I think this is the interesting runner in the Summer Stakes. Give me some high-level thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the only race that we're covering for TSN is the mile, so I've just done sort of the peripheral work for the 2-year-old races to this point. You already brought up Mysterious Night, the fact that Appleby sends one over. We saw what he did last year with what could be argued sort of backup runners, some less than types as far as back home is concerned. This one is a group winner in France. I don't know what the form looks like off the top of my head, but this one is supposed to be a runner, supposed to be, close to that odds-on range. If you're going against, I don't know. I mean, look, Chad Brown at 4, 5, 6 to 1 in a Grade 1 2-year-old race. I know was no match in the Skidmore in that most recent run, but the race has produced a next out winner, a horse that was just only a half length ahead of this one. I don't know. I think he could do worse than take a shot on a praise at a decent price here in this spot for Chad.
That doesn't sound crazy to me. We'll see how they end up betting and what ends up happening there. Let's move on quickly to the Grade 1 Natalma, the sister race for these 2-year-old fillies going a mile on the turf. And my biggest surprise in this race is not who shows up, but who doesn't show up, which is really any invaders from New York or Europe, leaving it, I think, a weaker runner of the Natalma than we usually see. And I think it's going to very much play into the hands, Matt, of number 1, Cairo Consort. This isn't a clever opinion by any means, but she absolutely smashed up the prep race for this. And she's got a pedigree being by Cairo Prince out of a Street Cry dam, where I think this extra ground is only going to be to her benefit. I think if she runs her race, it's going to be very tough for any of these others. I will probably play one saver on the 2 turns proven number 3, G. Lori. She's got to get faster. She had a bit of a setup in that debut race. The form is hard to decipher. There have been some horses that ran okay out of it, but under very middling circumstances. We've seen these Grand Motion babies get faster by leaps and bounds with their racing. I'm not ruling out the 3G Lori, but really, like, the figure monkey in me says, just give it to Cairo Consort now. What do you think?
Yeah, so that was the only concern for me. G. Lori was the one that drew my attention. That was before I saw the morning line of 4-1. To your point, I mean, she needs to improve. I don't want to say dramatically, but pretty dramatically. I mean, especially compared to the inside runner who's got a buyer of 76 in her back pocket. The 57 simply not fast enough. And to your point, you look at the Timeform US fractions as far as the pace splits are concerned, had a pace to run at and did so. But I think back to Sharing, who won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf from Motion a few years back. She went into that race on the heels of a visually spectacular victory at Laurel, and she was light on figs, but your eye told you that she was the goods. I've got to go back and watch the tape again to be fair, but to win by 6 on your debut for Motion, and now he immediately steps her up into a grade 1 going 1 turn, which it's not the easiest thing to throw at a horse who's going to be making her first start against winners. I don't know. I mean, I think she's the most intriguing one in the race to me, put it that way. I don't know that I would be touching her at 4-1, but if she runs well here, I think all bets are off. I think, you could be looking at anything, especially come Breeders' Cup time, if we're talking about the Juvenile Fillies Turf.
Good stuff, Matt. And with that, we will, on the late week show, go to a break. And back here on Horseplayer Happy Hour, we'll continue the discussion. Good note from Michael on Mysterious Night. The full to Alpiqua, who we know ran so well here. Notes, beat a bunch of bedposts in France. I guess he wasn't too impressed with the form from the Dovo race. But I still think, just looking at figures, even if you assign a modest buyer figure of around 80, which I think is what the boys came up with, and if you're interested in more of that type of analysis and figure conversion, you got to be reading Stephen Bonnick over at InTheMoneyPodcast.com and also following him at Too Many Voles on Twitter. An 80 buyer probably wins this race, right? I mean, it's not necessarily nailed on, but it's certainly very competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think an 80, if you're not winning, you're a close second. I don't. It's hard to sit here and say definitively, oh, nobody's going to do that. But most of these girls who have run a few times, or even with the boys who we're kind of alluding to, you would need to jump up in a pretty big way to get to an 80 at this point. So I tend to agree with that. I think if you get close to that, you're probably in the winner's circle.
How about this? Last race at Aqueduct at Belmont, Aqueduct, 1880 winner and a $134.50 exacta for 2. So the guy who is telling us we don't pick enough winners in the comments, he can put that in his pipe and smoke it. Let's move on to this next race at Aqueduct, and we'll go from there. We've got, what are we up to? Race number 8. We've got this $40,000 claimer where 2 of them are scratched. So we've got a field of 6 going postward, and the market seems to be fairly equally divided between number 3, Major Spin, and number 6, Hometown. Did you have any strong preferences in here?
Well, so I'm handicapping it a little bit on the fly. I mean, stating the obvious, if Hometown gets back to one of those races with Chad, he's probably going to win. I don't need to find out at 4-5 that he can't do it anymore. I don't know. Zuzudini, I'm a little interested. The 7 horse on the outside, the second biggest price on the board, 10-1. Tried winners for the first time last out at Saratoga, going a mile and an eighth. Now we turn back to a 1-turn mile, so you're going to have bottom. Still maintains the same level. You get the 5-pound bug aboard. I don't know. I can see this one rolling from the back of the pack at the end, especially if this turns into a bit of a stagger fest late. That's where I would go. I'd go with the 7, Zuzudini.
Certainly getting a good price. I'd take Major Spin at the prices over the 6, Hometown. Looks like a potential best speed. And you look back at that allowance race on July 8th, and that just came back very strong. When you're looking at Timeform US race ratings, that came in as a 108, looking at a projected 94 here. and that I think was devised before the scratches came in. So maybe a field that Major Spin can wire. And I don't hate your idea at all. Let's go right back to the well and play a little exact to see if we can get this favorite out of the mix here at Belmont, and if we can keep the good momentum going. It's good to have more than one race on the show. There's so much time between races at Saratoga. We often only had one, and they pop from the gate, and it doesn't look like anybody is in a hurry for the lead. I think the three will eventually make it by default, but didn't have to use much energy to get there. But I do think we'll eventually poke through here from this big long shot Story fella on the outside. I don't love just sort of galloping along with a big long shot on your outside. It doesn't feel like the most comfortable position for your horse, but who knows? Maybe this energy saved early will help us out late. The really bad news for Major Spin, not just having this big long shot on the outside, but number 6 Hometown looks just an absolutely perfect position. I'll say this, Zuzudini, though, if the 6 and 3 can engage early, maybe Zuzudini can just trip out perfectly here. You happy with where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. And the only other thing I would say, and I haven't paid enough attention today, I don't know how fast the track is or isn't playing, but 46 and 4 for a half for non-winners of 2. That's pretty honest. It's not like they're walking out there. The question just is, are any of these other horses behind the ones that are setting the pace any good?
Yeah, well, we're going to find out here. It looks like, bit of a 3-horse vibe. I mean, the 3 still hasn't really been asked it while the winner is getting away. A little strange there. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Jock might not be happy with what he feels under him. Unfortunately, it looks like the 4-5 favorite is going to win from here in your house, Matt. And maybe a runner like the 4 will come in here to run second in behind. But yeah, the bird has flown here, and the chalk backers are going to get a nice win.
Yeah, and again, I didn't want to find out, and I don't feel bad about not picking a horse like this. And to be fair, again, with that pace scenario, I mean, they stopped the clock in 40 flat. If you believe that, they're crawling home. The pace did completely disintegrate. The 2 horses that were 100 out of it ran second and third. This horse won the pace battle and was able to go on with it. But it is that kind of perfect scenario of, look, if the horse runs back to any of the back races. Yeah, he's lengths better than anyone else in here. I didn't need to find out at odds on.
Sometimes you just got to let him beat you, and that was the case there. And it won't have much of an impact on the leaderboard. I can't imagine too many contest players being too upset about that. The typical thing in these win-place contests, if it's not your horse, you root for the chalk. So there were plenty of people, low-key / secondary rooting for that one to come in. When we get that official, I say we do that leaderboard. We didn't get a good chance, actually, Craig, to do the tour leaderboard. So maybe we do that while we wait. And then if anybody has any other questions, hit us up. Rob has popped in the chat. We'll say hi back to him. Happy to do a little bit of interaction, and we'll do those 2 leaderboards, and then we'll call it a day because I'm out of beer, and I got to get back downstairs. So Greg Kingman, I mentioned the huge week he had. That 490, he ain't out of reach, but, Michael Cavana, Togo Travaglia, they got to get Matthew Abbott, they got to get busy. That was just, a decisive move last week from Greg Kingman, who really is in pole position to get that $10,000 Breeders' Cup betting challenge seat that you get for winning the overall tour. Michael Cavana has been there all year, Togo Travaglia, Matthew Abbott, Dylan Donnelly, Michael Domable has been active in the comments, Dave Nichols, always love seeing him up in Saratoga, Kirk Rockwell, Tyler Sisk, David Priz, Howard Johnson, Trish Smith, who's frequently in our comments as well, Bruce Meyer, who we've interacted with on Twitter before. I will read a few more. Scott McGovern, John Ball III, Matt Vagvolgi, final tableist last year in this event, Nancy Spence, Ernest Tate Jr., Brendan Snodgrass, a name that's just fun to say, Dennis Clark, Edwin Sinowicki, Matt Miller, last year's BCBC champion, and we'll do these 15s and then we'll wrap it with the shout-outs. Mark Wilgard, Nathan Kaczynski, Rogarello Garcia, Robert Hernandez, Henderson. But go back one. I messed one up. Robert Henderson, Ryan Henderson. Oh, it threw me off with the 2 Hendersons. And Kevin Walsh, Bruce D'Agostini, Anthony Schiavone, another Mark Henderson. I'm confused by all the Hendersons. I got to be honest with you. And then we'll do 2 more. Bob Montgomery and Jake Jacobs from RacingFlow.com. We appreciate everyone who's played all year long. Want to give those shout-outs to the people at the top of the tour leaderboard. And does this mean has Race 8 gone official? I think it has. We've got somebody trying to do what Greg Kingman did last week and run 1-2 on the same entry here. Stephen McNatton looking pretty strong at the moment, 48-30 with his 2 entries, and he's runner on both to close things out with the 8 and the 7. We'll see how it turns out for him. John Ball III only 10 cents back in 3rd place. Gina Giarusa, a name I haven't seen on here before. Godspeed to you, Gina. We'll see how you make out. Oh, James Millar from In the Money Media, doing very, very well with 47.80 as well. Maybe he'll qualify for Saturday. Jeff Van Dree, Gregory Lewis, Nick Toy, Mark Wilgard, Michael Foster, Michael Bryant, John Gasper, Ernest Hay Jr., and David Priz. So lots of familiar names. And then Matthew Abbott, who we know is doing well on the tour. He's got
I was going to say, Pete, that's the kind of, if you're looking for a little storyline, little side route, you just mentioned somebody's going to have to do something pretty big here at the very end. Let's say Matthew Abbott goes runner here. Don't know what the prices will be. If he can pick up another, let's just say he runs 1-2, he picks up 190 points. We got a race.
This feels like the EV strategy. Like, look at all these wise guys with their 2 entries playing exactly the same horse every time. I think people are really trying to make a run, understandably, at that $10,000 regular season BCBC seat. So, and even if it doesn't get you all the way to the top, that's going to be enough to, ensure participation in the tournament at the end of the year. So for folks that don't know, I think it's like 20 games we have. The top 2 every week, they qualify for the playoffs. And then the 40 players on that tour leaderboard we were looking at before who are in the top positions, they're going to join those exacta finishers. And that will also run off to a Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge seat. So 3 different ways to win. And, it's been a fun season as we wind down here to the end. But 2 more weeks to go and still really all to play for. I mean, one of my favorite things about this is you could tell your friend tomorrow, hey, get in these games the next 2 weeks, and they have a good chance, if they run hot, to participate in this prize pool, which is something I've never seen from any other tour format. So very excited.
And to your point, there's still all to play for, even at the bitter end. You may not win the regular season tour. That doesn't mean that you can't get your spot in the playoffs, which then could parlay you to a $10,000 BCBC seat.
Matt, we're about wrapped here. Looking forward to you coming up. Will you get to the track tomorrow?
No, unlikely. I'm not due in until about 2 o'clock East Coast time, and then by the time I get to my room and all that kind of stuff. So
Gotcha.
It'll probably be a Saturday in and out for me.
Gotcha. Well, hopefully we'll get a chance to hang.
Absolutely.
Really looking forward to it. Not sure where they're going to have us positioned on Saturday. Tomorrow we're on the Stella Artois patio at Woodbine. I'm excited to check that out. I want to give another big thanks to Bellwood's Brewery. This place really special. You can't get a full sense of it here. I'll hold this over. You can see it's nice little patio out here.
Oh yeah.
Ossington neighborhood. You can see they make the beer right here. You see the tanks behind me, and I'm super impressed. Some really fun sour stuff and some really good hoppy stuff. Some in the more, I'd say they do. It's very versatile. There's some stuff that you call East Coast IPA. There's some stuff that you call West Coast IPA, and then there's stuff that really reminds me of breweries in England that I've had. Just like really clean, pure hop expressions. Awesome, great food, and an incredibly nice staff as well. Who've been very accommodating to me today. So now I got to figure out, am I going to stay here and eat, or am I just going to zip up to Woodbine? We'll figure that out off air. But yeah, this was great fun. So thanks to our friends at Bellwood. Thank you to producer Craig for rolling with us today. Our friends at the Breeders' Cup, especially Justin and Haley, but really everybody over there. I mean, they've just been such a joy to work with, and we're planning some really special stuff for the next 8 weeks or 7 weeks now ahead of the Breeders' Cup. Any closing thoughts from you, Matt Bernier?
No, looking forward to a big weekend of racing north of the border. And again, who knows? Maybe it'll be chaos. Maybe we'll get boxcar prices. Part of me thinks we're going to see the cream rise, and maybe we could be seeing potentially the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Mile.
Let's see how it all plays out on Saturday. Plenty of coverage over at InTheMoneyPodcast.com. Drew and I doing a whole special show, and obviously the late week show. We're going to have coverage of racing all around the country, including some fun stuff from Churchill Downs. Lots of stakes racing going on there this weekend as well. Thanks to you, Matt, one more time. Thanks to Greg one more time. This show's been a production of the Breeders' Cup and In the Money Media. On our side, over at ITM, our business manager is Drew Coatney. Our chief creative officer is Jonathan Kitchen. I'm Peter Thomas Florentine. May you win all your photos.